Okay, welcome to our channel once again. It's been a while posting life's challenges, but today a very important video is a spin-off the Brexit videos, and this is to do with the ECHR, being the European Convention on Human Rights, which came into force in September 1953. And so, as at the 5th of June 2025, the leader of the Tory, basically the opposition party, Kemi Badenoch, basically made a proposal to take Britain or the United Kingdom out of the international agreement, being the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think it's not just an attempt to do just that, but take the UK out of other international human rights conventions or treaties or laws. Obviously, they are all the same. And so UK being a leading member of the UDHR, being the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, its articles that was also established in December 1948. These are the international treaties that protects the rights of individuals from the state, from basically stopping the state from dehumanizing people and abusing their rights with impunity. So these things were very necessary after the First and Second World Wars. The atrocities that were caused on humans, on the rights of people, based on the ego of politicians to engage in wars and causing extensive suffering to its citizens. It was then necessary to protect, obviously, the rights of individuals against the state. And so there are various articles that are enshrined both in the UDHR, being the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which has been the springboard for other international treaties or conventions, including the European Convention on Human Rights. And so, obviously, Britain was out of the basically out of the EU based on Brexit, 23rd June 2016. However, Britain remained in these international treaties. And so, as we can see from the article written by Chris Mason, a BBC political editor, on the 5th of June 2025, Kemi Badenoch is basically putting together a commission led by Lord, let's get this name right, Lord Wolford, who basically is leading the commission to look at the possibility of taking Britain out of the ECHR. And so one will say, what is the ECHR? Being the European Convention on Human Rights. What it is, as I mentioned earlier, is an international treaty. That is an international law that the UK is signatory to, and also is also a leading founding member. This was spearheaded by then the UK war leader, Sir Winston Churchill, a powerful political figure in the history of the United Kingdom. So he was part of the Conference of Hague in 1948, coming together with about 100 European parliamentarians to establish the European Convention on Human Rights. So in that convention, some extracts or what Winston Churchill said. He talked about this ECHR being, I would say, the center for our movement stands the idea of a charter of human rights guarded by freedom and sustained by law. So this is what Sir Winston Churchill had to say and what he supported. And not only that, the UK was the first nation to actually ratify this European Convention on Human Rights. Now, based on this convention, there was also the need to basically establish justice. That is, if member states or if anybody actually went forth to breach the articles of the ECHR, there was the need to establish a court, which is the European Court of Human Rights, which is based in Strasbourg. There was a need to establish that, which was actually later on established in 1959, basically to be the arbiter in the event that a state or any other party basically abused or infringed on the articles of the charter, then such institutions or governments or individuals or business organizations could be brought to justice and could be sanctioned by the European Court on Human Rights. So you may probably realize that when these things were established, this is what gave the individual some sense of confidence, knowing that laws had been established at that level beyond national level to protect the rights of citizens. Another thing which is important with the ECHR being the European Convention on Human Rights is that it places responsibilities on states to actually protect its citizens from the abuse and dehumanization of the rights of its citizens. And therefore, it was not just basically a law for the rights, but it actually did place a responsibility for the nations, the member nations that had ratified this international treaty, which UK basically was the leading member, to protect its citizens from any form of abuse by having respective laws and protections within those nations. And so we then realize that the UK human rights law would have then extracted a lot of its articles from the ECHR, so that it's sort of aligned and doesn't contradict or didn't contradict with the articles of the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, the other important aspect of it is that in the event that an individual or any entity couldn't find justice or felt that the abuse had been their rights had been abused and that they couldn't find justice within their respective nations, they could then go to Strasbourg to seek further justice. And the findings or the rulings out of Strasbourg basically overruled any judiciary entity in the respective nations that had ratified this ECHR. And so we realized that when obviously the idea of selling the Brexit was there for us to take control of our borders, to take control of our laws, to take control of our judiciary. Once we basically came out of the EU, I think many people felt that indeed we had actually taken full control of our laws and also of our judiciary systems. But the reality is that we are members or ratified, we are member nations that have, or even I would say not just member nations, but founding member nations that have ratified both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was established December 16, 1948, and also the ECHR, which came into force in September 1953. And so we were somehow still bound by the rulings. Basically, it overrules the highest court within the UK. And so this is where immigration, which has been played as the main subject, mostly based on asylum seekers, and removing maybe criminals that have come into the UK. They probably, one will say, the media have sold the idea that these things have actually these international human rights treaties are the ones that have been protecting these, let's say, foreign criminals that needs to be deported and that are being protected by these laws. But you probably recall that I made an earlier video, probably a couple of months ago, in which I looked into the details of the data surrounding UK migration. To my surprise, I discovered that the data on asylum seekers, or general, this sort of, asylum seekers, or sort of migration based on humanitarian reasons, the data was very flat. So it means that really it has been played out to be one of the biggest problems, but indeed it's not. When the data actually demonstrated that the rise in the number of migrants in the UK were coming from the skilled worker scheme, that is, people coming from the African nations, from India, from Pakistan, from probably from, I don't know, China, Japan, Asian countries into the UK, was making the bulk of the numbers. And also those coming in to study, that was also a very big number. Now, these are people that the nation does make a hell of an amount of money from, i.e., from the very high, domestic, basically fees for international students, and also student accommodation, and just generally the living cost in the UK. So these people were indeed bringing in a lot of money into the UK. In effect, when you cut them out and say you don't want them to come into the nation, you may then realize that economically these can affect the nation in a detrimental manner. And so the drumming on these asylum seekers being used as a political football is something that indeed needs to be reviewed, and the truth needs to be told for all to know that indeed there isn't such a big problem. And even if there is, people should go and research the data themselves. So we see here Kemi BADENOCH being the head of the Tory party, basically saying that we should get out of the ECHR. Now, this is why, at the cover, you see Winston Churchill versus Kemi BADENOCH. So these are the founding fathers of this nation that have stood for this nation in times of war and defended this nation, and also felt the need to defend the rights of people, rights of citizens, rights of individuals. And so the statement by Winston Churchill, these are powerful statements that this nation should not depart from, because we have come to an era where, obviously, with us coming from the EU, there is this parliamentary supremacy, which is being used by, obviously, political parties to change laws at will without really giving due consideration to the ethos of the ideas that were established by the founding fathers of this nation, which I will say Winston Churchill is indeed a pillar of this. And so his statement when he made at the Conference of The Hague in 1948 is not something that should be looked down upon. So he says here, in the center of our movement stands the idea of a charter of human rights guarded by freedom and sustained by law. Then not only that, we go on here to see what the parliamentarians, those 100 parliamentarians that established the ECHR, they said, we desire a charter of human rights guaranteeing liberty of thought, assembly and expression, as well as rights for political opposition. We desire a court of justice with adequate sanctions for the implementation of the charter. So you can see this is what obviously the founding fathers of ECHR, this is what they were looking for. And so we look at some of the articles. Article 1 is basically for the protection of the rights of the citizens or the individuals. They basically placing that responsibility on the state to have laws, to have systems to protect the rights of the individual. Article 2 talks about the right to life and the right for the right so that nobody loses their life or nobody goes to kill somebody. Article 3 of the ECHR deals with cruel, basically. What we have here, Article 3 prohibits torture, cruel, inhumane and degradable treatment of human beings. And so what brings me to this subject? There is a reason why this video is being made. It is the deplorable state of justice within the United Kingdom. And so I throw this question out to anybody that has had any sort of experience with our courts and our justice system here in the UK in recent times. I have had the opportunity to attend court 3 times, not in a very short space of time, and on each account, where clear evidence has been put in place and procedures set in place, which gives a clear, these are basically a no-brainer. I have seen justice denied. And on one occasion, there has been an instance where obviously this thing was being conducted online, where a judge, whether knowing or unknowing that we were still online, told the person that heads the jury to come up with a certain verdict. And the worst part of it was that there was an important aspect, something that needed an expert interpretation that was totally relevant to the case. All these things were ignored by the judge. And the judge, to just show the degree of impunity, the judge actually requested from the person that is heading the jury to come up with a certain verdict, or he expected them to come up with a certain verdict. And guess what happened? The next day, that was the verdict. It was the verdict that the judge had requested. That is what was read out in court. So that you were denied justice with a level of impunity that is nothing but ridiculous. And so these are some of the reasons, or some of the key reasons, why you have this institution like the European Court of Justice and the European Convention on Human Rights. And so this whole legal processes, even to basically attend such an inquest or something at a local court, requires a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of money. You cannot even afford legal counsel. In the UK, we don't have this before this pro bono system where lawyers could sort of apply to the state to basically gain funds to support an individual for a case. All these things have been removed, and so if you're not a wealthy person, you can forget about justice. And even if you are, depending on the club of where the judge is, whatever club he's involved in, and the party that you are dealing with, if it's a powerful institution, with leaders that are colluded in various clubs, then I'm sorry, you are never going to see justice. Now, this type of a thing, the problem about it is how it damages our democratic institutions. So you see that at the times of the war, with Sir Winston Churchill being a key figure in the drafting of the European Convention on Human Rights, and obviously his effort of presenting UK as the first nation to have ratified that international treaty in 1951. When you see this, it places a great deal of responsibility on this nation, and it held this nation as a leader in the world. So many people that knows Britain was that nation where individuals, if you could be the least person, as long as you were basically presenting your factual cases, you're providing relevant evidence, and it's clear, it doesn't matter how small you were, you had a chance equally as a bigger organization to obtain justice. But we have seen this system constantly eroded over the years, and we have come to the point where now we are out of the EU, taking controls of our laws and borders and the whole lot, and yet we are not using this thing effectively to prove to the citizens that indeed that domestically justice could be found. How is the justice system regulated? How are judges regulated? What are the kind of things in place to ensure that the judgment from justices or from judges are actually in line, are prudent, carries integrity, delivers indeed justice? These are all questions. And as I'm making this video, because I have personally had the experience where you present clear facts that even a child could make a judgment based on those facts, and you're blatantly told in the face that you've lost the case and there is nothing that you can do. When I have gone further to obviously find out if there was any sort of ombudsman that obviously looks after this, looks at, or oversee the UK judiciary systems, what I found that these institutions are there, but the stipulations, the list of items that they have stated, basically makes that judge untouchable. His word is final, whether he is corrupt or not. His word is final. There is nothing that you can do. And if you take it to a higher court, you may end up with the same kind of judgment. And there is nothing that you can do. So these type of systems damages the fabric of our democratic society. And this is why I make this video, to say, why does Kemi BADENOCH want to take the UK out of the ECHR? If they talk about people that have criminals that are in the system that needs to be deported, the question that you ask yourself is that how does those criminals get into this country in the first place? Secondly, how do they get in without being detected. So really, the work should be at the source so that these criminals don't get in the first place, and let alone you working a way to deport them. And it talks about a family that used the Ukrainian system to try to seek asylum in the UK and the whole lot. All these things are no reasons for the nation to actually pursue the idea of getting out of these international treaties. This nation must take its leading role at the United Nations level, being the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, at the European level, being the European Convention on Human Rights, and also at the local level, UK human rights law must be upheld. These are established laws, and even if they were to have any sort of dramatic changes, these should be done by basis of a referendum where the public is well informed to make such decisions, so that it does not become like the issue of the Brexit, where so much resources have been spent taking the nation out, only to find ourselves getting back into it again. And so this is the purpose of this video, is to say that UK, the nation's judiciary systems, needs to be reviewed properly. It needs to give that confidence to the citizens, be it small or great, that they can indeed find justice. But for the experience that I have personally had in this season, where I've attended called to speak on people's behalf for 3 times, and to see that relevant matters and evidences are totally ignored, to see that a judge could tell what he wants to hear rather than leaving the jury to come up with their verdict, to remove relevant facts, deliberately stopping relevant facts to be presented, because relevant facts, if there's a relevant piece of information that needs to come from an expert testimony, that needs to, if the person is not ready or they have not provided that information, then the verdict or the jury must wait until they have that information before they reach a verdict. So you have a lot of omissions. You have preempting judiciary or the jury's response, blocking the defense to come up with relevant information, and so many other failings are just nothing but a disgrace of a system that had really good intentions when it was established. So there is a need to go back to basics, to start doing things right again, to have institutions in place to basically regulate judges. Yes, the most respectable people within our society, but they shouldn't be above the law. They should also be regulated, just to ensure that they are doing their work and they are doing it properly. Because if they don't, what then happens is that you damage the entire fabric of democracy, and this causes a loss of confidence in the system, where people, even when they are being abused and their rights, they're being dehumanized, their rights are taken away, there isn't much they can do, or they will refuse to do anything about it. And this is not what the leaders, the great leaders of this nation, such as Sir Winston Churchill, this is not what they fought for. They fought for a nation that will have citizens that will be proud of the systems that are established. Then there is also the danger that obviously the United Kingdom, being the leading nation in these democratic processes and establishment of all these international treaties. We know that the Strasbourg building, I done a research on it, was actually designed by a British architect. And so this really tells you the involvement of this nation in all these international treaties, international courts, international conventions, and that leadership role. We have taken the steps of losing our position through the Brexit, but now we find ourselves going back. And so this is a warning to us that whatever position that this nation holds, in international conventions, international treaties, international courts, international laws, this nation must always uphold its position and keep its respect in the international scene and in the international standards. And so, this is what makes this video. If you have your opinion, feel free to express it. Share your opinion. Let us know what you think. In the next video, I will try to get into details of this case, which I had the privilege of, speaking on behalf of family or an acquaintance to share with you. This actually involved the death of a young man in the UK prison, a young man who had learning disability, who did not deserve to die for that matter. His life was cut short after 5 days of spending time in a UK prison. And we see the impunity and the abuse of right, which basically falls under Article 2, Article 123 of the ECHR, basically the right of the state to protect the individual, then the individual's right to life, not being killed by anybody, and not basically and go unaccounted for, and the right for not being treated in a cruel or degradable manner. So, if this case was to go further to the European Court of Human Rights, then surely, such a decision that was taken locally would have been easily overturned. But people are so exhausted that they are not able to pursue these things. And so this comes to the end of this video. If you have had any kind of experience and you want to share your experience seeking justice in a court in the United Kingdom, then surely let your opinion be known. Let's get to this collective thing and see and just basically voice these things out so that the justice systems in the United Kingdom could be well cleaned up, so that the small, the great, the good, the bad, the weak and the strong can all find refuge, or can all find justice when they need it. So thank you for watching this video, and hopefully we come up with the next video where I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into that case without basically mentioning what the prisons were, who were involved, but at least we have the information, the file, which we'll read some extracts of it to just expose the cruel nature in which this young man was killed, and the fact that nobody has been brought to account for that. Thank you for watching our channel. Until next time, see you. Goodbye.